the first quarter of 2023 saw 228 tons of gold purchased by the central banks. That's the most ever in a quarter, which followed up a year where it was a record, where 1,136 tons were purchased. You put the last year and the first quarter together, it is the most gold that central banks have ever bought ever over an 18-month period of time. And so you are beginning to see massive amounts of gold and silver be accumulated by the biggest money in the world. And this is something that betrays the price. In other words, the big money is using the suppression of the Western markets, gold and silver prices on COMEX, to drain the exchanges, not only of the COMEX, but of the LBMA. We saw the biggest one-day withdrawal of silver in the history of the Shanghai Gold Exchange 2 weeks ago. So the big money is using this environment and this price suppression to reposition and get ahead of the game before people wake up. And here again, our media does a woeful job of telling us exactly what's happening. You have to dig and dig and dig and listen to a guy like me to figure this out. The biggest money in the world will have already pulled them off of the exchange. And I just say it this way: when you pull your metal off of the exchange, when we see, for example, in 1 week, millions of ounces taken off the COMEX, it's gone. It's never coming back. It loses its industrial liquidity. So if an industrial player like Tesla, Elon Musk says, I'll pay a big premium for every silver bar people will sell me. Well, once they leave the ecosystem of COMEX, to get them back in there would have to be a huge task of re-assaying and shipping them into the system, reintroducing them, assaying them at a big cost and time lag, where you would never do that. These are one-way tickets, and this stuff's never, ever coming back. And I think that really portrays much higher prices in the end. And the big money is using this environment to reposition without any attention being drawn to exactly what they're doing. Ultimately, it speaks to much higher prices in the metals market. You can't have 25% inflation because everyone in the world who's owned dollars and had to own dollars since 1974 as a condition of the agreement with Saudi Arabia, hey, you'll protect us and the Saudi kingdom, and we will denominate through OPEC oil globally in US dollars. So everyone on the planet's owned dollars for 50 years. And if they no longer need to, they dump dollars. That creates the inflation. But the byproduct is of spiking interest rates. You can't have 25% inflation and 5% interest rates, or your currency becomes worthless. So when interest rates rise, not controlled by the Fed, but by the market to compensate for the hyperinflationary dumping of dollars, then everything that is inversely related to rising interest rates, namely stocks, bonds, and real estate, collapse. And here is your great reset. And talking about the fact that, or even the fact that the Fed has allowed the money markets to invest in the overnight reverse repo market, which has allowed the money markets to provide daily liquidity at 5% guaranteed by the Fed. That's greater than you get in any CD in a regional bank that Janet Yellen said won't be bailed out when they go under this time. So you have a fuse lit under the banks, and look at who is orchestrating this. Lael Brainerd, but the bigger one would be Jared Bernstein, who was just appointed head economic advisor to the Biden administration. Jared Bernstein's main thesis is losing the world reserve status. He wrote a report in 2014 called King Dollar No More. It was picked up in the New York Times. You can Google it, pop right up. The rest of the world is looking for alternatives. You could not draw it up any better. One guy wants to get rid of the world reserve, and the other wants to get rid of all the banks and go digital currency. Could it be this is a planned path that we are doing what we are doing to finally get to a point where we can consolidate all the banks, we can roll out a CBDC, and we ultimately lose the world reserve status? Why? Because our debt burden is so big that we can never find our way out of it. So if you find a villain instead who ruined the American way of life, rather than it being the brain dead monetary policy of the Federal Reserve and the fiscal policy of the government, who have created more money in 4 years in the history of the country before it, while maintaining 0% interest rates, creating distortions that have to work themselves out. And when they do, it blows up the system. Well, now there's your villain. So I get, everything that is happening, you have to ask yourself, is it done coincidentally, or is there a bigger agenda here? And I am
Right.
beginning to believe that this is all being done purposely. They know where we are heading, and look at the people advising the president. In 45 days, when Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank failed, we added 14,000 new clients in 45 days. I have never seen anything like it. But the level of fear that I saw when those banks failed, the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in the history of this country, I've never seen anything like it. And quite frankly, I believe we ain't seen nothing. And this will be no different when you realize that the most sophisticated money in the world has literally drained the exchanges of the majority of all the stockpiles of gold and silver. And so they're front running because they know the playbook, they know what's coming. And that to
Exactly.
me is why, even though it's frustrating to see the price behave the way that it has, I see a bigger picture. And the same way that you guys are able to see a bigger picture with XRP and Ripple, you see a bigger picture that others may not notice on the surface. And I think that's what your job is to do, is to help people understand what that bigger picture is. This is what my job is. And I'll simply say this, that as it pertains to metals, the price is being betrayed by the exodus and the accumulation by the most sophisticated money in the world. If price was completely indicative of value, then who's draining the exchanges? Why are the central banks on a buying spree of literally unparalleled comparison? And you have to ask yourself, is this bigger than what the price would indicate? And that's why I talk a lot about misdirection, about suppression and misdirection, because it's not as straightforward as your eyes would lead you to believe. You have to trust your gut. The big money are leaving the commercial banks in massive, massive amounts and going directly into yield backed by the treasury market, going directly to the Fed and staying away from the systemic nature, the systemic risks of the banks. And I really do believe this fits hand in glove with what Lael Brainerd wants. Get rid of the banks. And if you're going to issue a CBDC, it's much easier to do it through 3 or 4 commercial banks than it is through 5,000 regional banks. If you don't wake up and open your eyes, you will never see what's coming. You can't get out of the way of it. A new system that would be a digital-based system and would gain acceptance because people would be hurting so badly. When Klaus Schwab says you'll owe nothing and you'll be happy, well, have no fear. We're going to take care of everything you lost, but just sign on the dotted line, accept the new digital currency, and all of your losses will now be in your new digital wallet on your iPhone. Is it true? Is it conspiracy? I don't know.